I want to start this with something funny. These are my headphones. They are wireless headphones. I use them all the time. Whenever I'm cleaning, I put them on and listen to an audiobook. Whenever I'm at school, I put them on and listen to an audiobook. And my kids think they are very, very ugly. So, fun fact. Alright, here's another quick video. I'm working through my top 10 and my most disappointing books right now. The disappointing ones are pretty easy. Like, if I didn't like it, it's pretty obvious I didn't like it. But I'm having a really hard time narrowing down my top books of the year. I read some really good ones. I read some that are kind of good, but not like 5 stars. So hopefully I'll have those narrowed down this evening, and I can film those tomorrow for like the last part of this year into New Year's. Good Lord, it's almost 2023. Anyway. Starting last year, I really got into listening to audiobooks, and this year was no exception. I have about an hour total. I'm on the road every day to and from my job, but also I was in a play this year, so I was driving a lot more, and I got into listening to a lot more audiobooks. I listen to audiobooks when I clean, and I listen to audiobooks when I'm doing planning at school. So I'm going to talk you through some of the top audiobooks that I listen to. These books are probably good regardless, and I did listen to more audiobooks than I did put on this list, but these are books that I think were probably improved by being audiobooks. Like, I feel like there was something more that I got out of listening to them via audio instead of just reading them on paper. So let's look through these real quick. I tried to do my homework on these and make sure I looked up who the narrator or narrators are of these books, because that is part of the plus of them. I think a really good narrated audiobook can add so much more to your understanding of the story, even if it's a simple or short story. And so that's actually really evident in the first book I'm going to talk about. It's actually the entire Singing Hills cycle by Ning Vo, narrated by Cindy Kay. I listened to all 3 of these novellas this year, 2 of them in January and one of them in, I think it was either late November, early December when it came out. And they're very meditative. They're very rhythmic. It definitely gives the feeling of like sitting around a fire and listening to somebody tell you tall tales or ghost stories. And I really appreciated that the narrator was very mellow and calm. There's like inflection, and the voice work is very good, but it's not chaotic. It's never very descriptive. I would say that it almost sounds like a newscast with people voicing things, but it's just the one person. So that is a really good audiobook, and those are really short if you're looking for something quick to listen to on a commute or while you're cleaning. The next one that I would recommend I listened to this year, and I'd forgotten that I listened to it this year, but I think it's because I get it confused with the first book in the series, and that is A Chorus Rises by Bethany C. Moreau. And this one was narrated by Charisse Booth and Ebony Flowers. There are 2 narrators. This book definitely benefits from having a narrator, because the book itself, much like the first book in the series, has to do with vocalization of like sirens and I think it's elokai. In this book specifically, and they hear things and they say things, and there are audio tricks that you can do in audiobooks that you can't do necessarily on paper, and I just really think that was communicated well through this narrator. And I think the narrator did a decent job of making our lead character not quite so miserably annoying as she could be. She did ground her a little bit in reality that made it decent to listen to her speak and listen to her internal thoughts. So I would recommend the audiobook of that if you have the time. The next book I would recommend was so well done, and I enjoyed it so much that mid-listen, I turned my car around and went to the nearest Books A Million and bought it. And that is Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. And it was narrated by Adam Lazari White. He did a fantastic job. Everybody felt very unique and well developed as far as vocal performances go. You would not know this was one guy doing it. He added a lot of emotional weight to the voices that was needed in this, because these guys easily could be unforgivable, unredeemable jerks. And depending on the reviews you read, they are. But I just felt like he added so much to it that I think that's part of the reason I liked this book so much, is because the narration was well done. So Razorblade Tears would be a great one to listen to rather than just read. The next book was so good. The characterization of our main character through her vocal work was great, but also there's sort of a twist in the characterization of the lead male character about a quarter of the way through, and she did that very well vocally as well. Again, a hard thing to do, but she was able to do it, and that is Little Thieves by Margaret Owen, and the narrator was Saskia Marveled. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. It was fantastically done. All the different characters could easily be hard to follow, but she made their vocal patterns and speech very unique to them, and it just added to it so much to hear all their unique characterization of the sarcasm and the flirtiness, and I really enjoyed it. I'm hoping they release the audiobook at the same time as the regular book when it comes out, because I really want to pick up the audio if it is narrated by the same person. So that is Little Thieves. Highly recommend. The next one was so well done and so emotionally devastating at parts that I almost had to pause the audiobook and just kind of like stop for a little while. And that is Suffer the Children by Craig DeLuey. It was narrated by R.C. Bray. It is the story of like all the children in the world die randomly right before Christmas. They all just die, and then they come back like the minute the last one dies. Like it goes all the way around the world, and once they all die, they all come back, and the horror at finding that they are not quite how they were when they first left. And every time they come back, they're a little bit less themselves and a little bit more something a lot worse. It was devastating as a book, but it was also devastating because the narrator did a great job of making everyone unique and just emotionally wrecked by the situation they were put in. Like, how far do you go to help your children? You know, at what point do you say enough is enough? Highly recommend that one for an audiobook. It was also very quick. The next is a cop-out. Actually, the next two are cop-outs. You should listen to the entire Finley Donovan series by Ellie Cosimano on audiobook. It's narrated by Angela Dahl, and she does a fantastic job. She's so funny, and she really just makes that book. Spoiler, I don't know if Finley Donovan is going to be on my top 10, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about it now. It really snuck in there last minute and was a surprise hit for me. I think I realized that I like cozy thrillers and mysteries better than I like regular thrillers and mysteries, because regular thrillers and mysteries are just taking themselves too seriously. Like get over yourself a little bit. I like this where there's humor and mistaken identity and hijinks, and just all of that was so well narrated by Angela Dahl that I would highly recommend, if you've got the time, to listen to the audiobook version of this instead. If you have the time and you are into macabre stuff, I recommend you listen to all of Caitlin Doherty's books. I listened to specifically Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs, which is where she collected questions that children asked her over the years and answered them, and From Here to Eternity, where she sort of went on a death tour to see how different cultures react to death and dead bodies. Caitlin Doherty is obviously, she's a YouTuber, Ask a Mortician, and she narrates her own books. So it's really a pleasant experience to listen to her narrate these things that she went out and did and wrote about. I did not listen to Smoke Gets in Your Eyes on audio because I read that a couple years ago, but I believe that one would also probably be very successful upon a listening. So I highly recommend those, especially if you already like Ask a Mortician. Those audiobooks are great. The last book on this list has actually 3 narrators, and it is The Pallbearers Club by Paul Tremblay, narrated by Graham Halstead, Ashley Lawrence, and Elizabeth Wiley. Because you have your main character who believes that his friend growing up is a vampire. You have her like margin notes where she is like, that's kind of revisionist history. It didn't happen like that. It was because of this. It was because of that. And then there's sort of like these interspersed narrated bits. And it's been a while since I've read it, so I can't remember what those were about, but that's where the 3 narrators come into play. And I really like them. They worked well together. I believe the main narrator was sufficiently creeped out. I liked the very deep calm voice that the vampire character had, that she was just kind of laughing off his assumptions that she was a vampire, but even at the end it's ambiguous as to whether she actually was or not. And I don't know, it played really well together. I don't know that I would enjoy reading it physically as much as I did the audio, because I would have to kind of put the voices there myself with those margin notes, but it worked really well with this. She interrupted him a few times, but most of the time she was either at the very beginning or very end of the entry, which I liked. But yeah, that's Paul Bearer's Club. I recommend as an audiobook. So those are the audiobooks that I recommend. I don't think any of the ones I listened to this year were particularly bad, except for quality-wise. Some of the books that I got from Hoopla, it's like there was a buffering issue, but I don't think that's the audiobook's fault. I think that's the app's fault. But for the most part, the ones I recommend, solid, no notes. They definitely improved upon the story, if not like elevated it in some way. What's the best audiobook you've listened to? I would like to add at the end of this an honorable mention that the Diviner's audiobook is actually really good. I think it's January Lavoie narrates those. She does a great job. Like, you almost don't miss a full vocal cast because it actually sounds really good with her doing it. So that's an honorable mention. Anyway, let me know what you've been listening to. If there's any books you specifically recommend I listen to on audiobook. I am open to pretty much anything except romance and smut. I am very freaked out by the idea of accidentally listening to that while cleaning my classroom. Alright, well, that's it for today's video. Bye.